What's up? It's Robert from Existence First, mental training for a modern world. I'm doing today's video on this headset here because people are being loud outside at the 7-Eleven, so got to be resourceful here. And welcome to the video. Today is May 16th, 4 billion and something. You maybe were expecting me to say 2021, but I don't really know where that comes from because the Earth is like much older than that. The Earth is over 4 billion years old, so hence the 4 billion and something. Second order of business, I'm glad to have you here regardless of what day of your life you're watching this. The average person lives 27,000 days and then passes on from this planet, from Earth, and I don't know if you're watching on day 10,000, on day 15,000, or on day 20,000, but I'm glad you're here. All right, now that we've kind of adjusted our perspectives to reality, let's get into talking about invisible dependencies. The human mind has a lot of dependencies, meaning like it depends on other things in order to work, and they're invisible because we don't really notice them until those things are gone or are messed with, and then we kind of go, aha, yeah, of course I see it. Case in point, food poisoning. I got food poisoning this week, actually, a couple maybe 5 or 6 days ago, and it was pretty rough. I don't know exactly what it was that I ate that gave me these symptoms, but I'm talking fever, headache, chills, fatigue, vomiting. Like, it was really rough. I had to take off of work for 2 days. And the upside of experiences like that is that in a way it brings us closer to reality, because it reminds us, like, hey, we're not invincible, and in fact we depend on our biology to function correctly. Right? If something messes with you, if you eat something it's contaminated, or it's got bacteria or whatever, and it starts giving you fever and chills, headache, and you can't even think, you can't even go about daily life, you realize, like, okay, I give up, I submit, like, yes, biology is senior. It needs to be in place in order for life to happen. Same thing is I've seen at nursing homes. I've seen an old man be very upset because he doesn't understand that his wife with like Alzheimer's is changing. He says she's not the same person. Yeah, of course she's not, because a person is dependent on their biology, and if you mess with the brain, if there's a brain disease, if the brain starts to forget things, or like, the person will act differently, right? Because they're dependent on their biology. Okay, so that's invisible dependency number one. Another dependency is dependency on structure, and having a structure in one's day. And I think this became evident during COVID and during quarantine and shelter in place, when people's regular routines and daily schedules were kind of thrown out the window, and suddenly they were sitting at home with nothing to do for hours and hours and hours. And that does something to the mind, right? Because structure is healthy. It's kind of like you got to look forward to that next thing. You got to have a sense of urgency of like, oh, I got to get this thing done, then I can move on to this thing. It instills a sense of order on the mind, and it's kind of healthy, right? Goal achievement and things like that. So when that's taken away and we're just sitting there with no structure, it really highlights how important that is. I learned that lesson, though, not during this past quarantine. I learned it a long time ago, the summer after my senior year of high school. This was the summer between high school and college, and I was going to be a math tutor like I did the previous summer, but they had not enough demand, right? So, and then they were already staffed enough. So I was not a math tutor that summer. I actually did not work that summer because of that. And I ended up just kind of sitting around the house watching TV. And soon enough, I was up every night until 5 or 6 a.m. watching untold stories of the ER, or other reality shows like that. And it was like super depressing. Like, I remember journaling like, oh, I'm so angry, blah blah blah. Like, that's what happens. That's what happens when you don't have structure. If you don't have a job, if you don't have like your own goals and your own things that you're like working towards. And so I learned that lesson, and that has never happened to me again. I've never been in that same mental space since then, because I learned from it. Because I was like, well, okay, well, this is how the human being works, so I'm just going to go about doing my structured things. Okay. And the last one, the last invisible dependency, is being dependent on approval, like approval from others and positive feedback. This is the one I don't know if I'd say I've completely figured it out yet, but it's one that I study a lot, right? I get a lot of compliments at work from coworkers, and I really, every time that happens, I'm like, part of me, at least half of me, is like really questioning, like, okay, like, acknowledge the compliment, like accept it graciously, but just don't let it inflate your ego or something like that. Because what happens when you inflate something, whether it's the economy, whether it's a balloon, whatever, the next thing that happens is deflation. So I'm trying to really like stay in the middle, and stay balanced and centered these days, regardless of what's going on in the environment. And that in itself is a practice of being independent rather than dependent on the environment. So while there are some things that we kind of have to depend on, I think, like our biology, there's always ways that we can try to become a little bit more independent, Like, let's say you're feeling tired, you can still get the job done, right? You can still exercise some independence from your biology by getting the job done, even if you feel tired. You can exercise independence of when someone criticizes you, you still keep moving forward the same way that you would if that person was praising you, right? And what's the middle one? Structure. If our structure is taken away and it's like, okay, all of a sudden we have a week and there's no plans, there's nothing to do, how good are you at still, chugging along, moving forward, instilling your own structure when external structure is removed? And so these steps, I think, help achieve a certain level of psychological independence, a certain level of spiritual independence, and that's what I'm rooting for. I'm rooting for the human being to be more resilient, to really be independent because the environment changes so much. I mean, now there's war in Middle East, and it's just, things are just going left and right and left and right. And I feel there's value of being able to stay in the middle and just keep doing what needs to be done, and being, to some degree, resilient or independent of one's environment. All right, in the next video, I'm 80% of the way through this book, Reality Transurfing, and as soon as I finish it, I'm going to create a book review video on it, because it's some really deep stuff on energy and psychology, and it's really changing the way that I perceive the world and psychological energy. So stay tuned for that, and in the meantime, think deeply and put your existence first.